Hey, welcome back and to this our second lecture on PLSQL procedures. Two major topics in this particular lecture. One, Oracle predefined packages and procedures, and two, the SQL developer IDE and debugger. Should be good fun. In particular, in this lecture, we are going to explore one of Oracle's undocumented package procedures, the DBMS backup restore.search files procedure, which goes out to an external directory and brings back for us a listing of all the files contained within that directory. In particular, it does that without the use of an Oracle directory object, so that's why it's top secret, and of course, since it's top secret, everybody on the internet knows about it. In general, we are looking at this as an example of an Oracle predefined procedure because there are a ton of these things out there, and you need to be able to take advantage of them to maximize your productivity in everyday programming. There's just a whole bunch of this stuff out there, and you do not need to reinvent that wheel. So we're going to take a look at that as part of our XML files example. In addition, as we're looking at that Oracle predefined procedure, we're going to look at how to debug a procedure within the SQL Developer IDE. Real standard stuff. You're going to have seen it all before as programmers within your other IDE environments, but we'll take a look at it just to make certain anyway. Should be great fun. Oh, and by the way, why does Oracle keep some of these procedures undocumented and try to keep them secret? It's because generally they are owned by the sys user, and Oracle in general doesn't want you in playing with sys because, again, you can mess things up. We're just going to go in there for a very light touch and be very responsible while we're in there. So should be great fun. We'll see you on the inside. All right. At the top of our script, we create a little single column table to hold the file names found from within our XML external directory. Really nothing interesting going on here. But please do make certain that you create that table as the MyNFL user. Alrighty, now I want you to log into Oracle as the sys user with sysdba privs. Word of caution here. Normally, PLSQL programmers have absolutely no business logging in as sys. If you had something like this to do, instead you'd call a senior designer or a very senior DBA. However, in this particular example, we're going to use one of sys's secret procedures, so we need to go in there temporarily. And by the way, these are all personal databases, so there's really no harm, no foul. Oh yeah, one more thing. We need to log into sys with the sysdba role. So when creating that connection, make certain to select that role from this drop-down box here. Let's not worry about the sysdba role for right now. It's a little beyond the scope of this course. We have bigger fish to fry. Again, just a gentle reminder here to be very, very careful when logged in as sys. Mistakes here can be very costly. Net, you'd probably end up reinstalling Oracle. Alrighty. I'm now assuming that you're logged in as sys with the sysdba role privs and being very careful not to mess anything up while you're in here. Let's take a look at the procedure we're going to create called get new files. The top signature and declaration sections of the get new files procedure should be pretty straightforward for you by now, so we're just going to skip right over those. Please note, however, the use of the dot notation to reference the temp game files table from within the MyNFL schema. Right. We're now sys, so to reference a table within another schema, I must use the schema name.table name notation. Alright, the next comment sort of tells our whole story here. In theory, and if you read the Oracle docs, There is no way in PLSQL to read all the file names associated with an external directory, the equivalent of a dir command. Well, gang, simply not true. Because sys has access to a DBMS backup restore package, and within that package is a very nice undocumented procedure called search files, which does a dir. Check it out. This procedure simply runs the search files procedure and stores the results into an undocumented $$ memory table. $$ memory tables are way beyond the scope of this course, but suffice it to say that they are the basis for many of the views sys makes available to programmers and DBAs. The important thing to remember, though, about an $$ table is that it's a memory table, and as soon as your session goes away, so does that table. Again, just a little security thing for Oracle putting together. Our routine, of course, does nothing more than runs that search file procedure and then reads each file from that associated $$ table. Once these file names are read, they're stored over into the temp game files table owned by the MyNFL user. Once we've got them over there, the MyNFL user can manage them as required. Finally, as sys, we grant execute privs on this new procedure to our buddy, the MyNFL user. Very elegant and so much cooler in that Oracle doesn't tell us about this otherwise hidden procedure. By the way, did you notice how he used an inline view in that loop? Pretty standard practice. The alternative is to create a cursor and then loop through each record of that cursor. Both work equally well. Alright, now I'm logged back in as our regular MyNFL user, and I'm going to create a little procedure which reads the file names out of that temp table and into the more permanent game files table. However, before we start analyzing this new procedure, let's take a quick look at the contents of my external XML directory. Looks like we have 3 XML files out there, 2 of which are associated with this example in this course. Just for the record, that third one is with a different course I'm working on. Cool, now we can go back and compile and analyze our procedure. I begin by simply hitting the execute script icon and oops, looks like I've got a compiler error. Hey, we're all coders. These are the easy ones to get a hold of, right? Must be either a typo or a syntax issue. Rather than fight these things here, I'm simply going to double-click the procedure in my tree over here on the left and bring it up in the procedure editor. Much easier environment to work with. Well, gang, obviously that was a setup, so I correct the issue by simply deleting out a rather faulty syntax wherein I had intentionally used a double rather than a single quote on a literal. Let's correct that issue by simply deleting out this bad stuff and uncommenting the good stuff down here. Now please also note that when I did that, IntelliSense wants to tell me that the semicolon associated with this comment is becoming a problem. Hey, what's the lesson? IntelliSense is a misnomer. Like in any IDE, trust your eyes, not IntelliSense. The SQL Developer IDE is just as simple-minded as 99% of the rest of them. It doesn't always work. Hit the compile button and then see if you've got issues. Also notice that I am compiling here with the debug option. Before, however, you can compile with the debug option, there's a couple of things you must do first from a setup standpoint. Now, these only need to be done once. First, as system, grant debug connect session to the user of choice, in our case, MyNFL. Next, within developer and as your MyNFL user, go up to the tools menu and choose the preferences and then the debugger option. Set the max port range and the min port range each to 4000. Save this and guys, we're ready to go. Anyway,
Once you've compiled with the debug option, you can now just click this little bug icon to run the procedure in debug mode. The debugger opens with a screen through which we can add parameter values. Now, had our procedure taken values, we would have entered them here. Step through or enter procedures, you know how the debugger game works. Only thing here with this IDE is to view the value of a variable, you hover over it or set a watch value. Oh, and to set a breakpoint, you click over here on the far left column of the screen. Anyway, you know how to debug a piece of code from here. You've been a coder for a while. You are now looking not for syntax or typo errors, but logic errors. Now, what code is supposed to do, and then verify through the variable values that in fact that's what it's happening. If you study this code, you will see that my original local filename .filename variable was carrying the entire directory path, and as such was failing the parse. When I trimmed that path off using the stripped filename variable, everything started working as expected. By the way, I like using the SQL code and SQL error message variables in my exception handler during debugging, as those messages are very often effective in helping me figure things out as well. Now, like any debugger and IDEs in general, the name of the game is simply to use it. The more you practice with these things, the easier they become and the more expert you become with their features. Okay, I suggest you take a minute to review the final code, but please understand in this last example, we are much more concerned with learning the debugger than writing a complex snippet of code. So really think about learning the debugger.
Alrighty, that concludes our discussion of the Oracle predefined packages and procedures, as well as the SQL developer debugger and IDE environment. Real straightforward stuff. So what did we learn? Well, we started with a look at the DBMS backup restore.search files procedure as an example of one of the many Oracle predefined packages and procedures available to us. Guys, don't reinvent the wheel. Put a wrapper and new logic around procedures that Oracle already has predefined at your disposal. Hit Google and do a quick search before you start reinventing the wheel. It's generally a very good idea. Oh, and by the way, associated with the resource materials for this particular lecture is a generalized listing of those Oracle predefined packages, so check that out. Again, you don't want to memorize that. You got Google right there to do a search and a quick in and out, but it's still a good lesson to be learned. Our next learning objective for this particular lecture was referencing objects outside of the current schema through the schema name .object name notation. We did this on both sides, both as sys, where we reference things within the myNFL schema, and then again as myNFL, referencing things within the sys schema. Remember, you got to have the privs to do this, and also remember that inside a sys user, you've got to be very gentle because you can leave an awful mess behind. We concluded this lecture with a look at the SQL developer debugger. Really straightforward stuff. I'm sure you've seen similar debuggers in your other IDEs. Nothing new there other than, a little setup work, which is again normal for any IDE. In particular, remember to go into that profile preferences and set the port numbers to 4K, and should be off and running. All right, that concludes this lecture on Oracle stored procedures. In our next lecture, we're going to start taking a look at functions. In particular, we are going to build a function that accepts a user-supplied password and returns a relative strength value for that password. Again, a great real-world example of stuff you're going to have to do on a day-to-day basis, so should be great fun. In the interim, you know what the deal is. Go out there and have yourself some fun, but learn something every day, because that's what's important.